Spawning from Japan are many, many iconic characters that we all know and love, including two of arguably its biggest icons, Godzilla, the king of the monsters, originating in the 1954 film, originally being a nuclear disaster, yet at times getting a bit more silly, as well as Hatsune Miku, a Japanese singer, I guess, who's not only been in several music videos, but also in several games, movies, etc. So, when you compare two of Japan's most iconic icons and put them in a fight, who would win? For this, we will be using just Miku, or a quote-unquote composite Miku, since Miku doesn't really have a canon per se, and mostly everything, crossovers, etc. are all pretty canon to Miku, so that could also apply. And we will be using Godzilla from the Showa era, as this is kind of the most thematic. This is where he started, so it does make the most sense to use the Showa era of the character, just to be more thematic. And credits to Godzilla King of the Monsters for the Showa arguments. Give his channel some love. And as I should mention, Miku's songs should also be taken, and the feats in the song should be taken literally and not just like promo, and we'll get into this a little more later. But starting off with Showa Godzilla, for a baseline, he would range anywhere from those star to solar tiers of power, as people like Ghidorah, who he fights, not only were birthed from stars, but even weaker characters like Ghidorah could upscale off of supernovas, as well as the Ghidorah destroying planets so badly it requires star levels of power, with even weapons that Ghidorah is superior to, blowing up planets would be higher into the large star ranges of power. Yet we also know things such as Ghidorah being utterly unrivaled in space containing black holes with hundreds of dying stars, a solar feat, with Ghidorah even turning cosmic rays into energies, a consistent solar system level feat as well. However, this is not the lowest you can get the character, and you can easily get Ghidorah higher, as well as therefore Godzilla. Not only do we know off of Ghidorah's previous statement that he would also be stronger than anything the Gorogoa ever has, and being Zone Fighter's strongest opponent, but Godzilla directly scaling to Zone Fighter as they do briefly tussle, this would get Godzilla into the Uni Plus ranges of power, as the Garuda had fourth dimensional weapons that raised the dimensionality of things around it, even being directly mentioned as the dimension of time. Backing up to this is the spatial dimension this is the fourth spatial dimension and not just a random fourth dimension or something, which Zone Fighter does eventually fight, take, and as well as destroy, as well as him just also fighting a flat-out fourth dimensional being. Even weaker Showa characters have statements of scaling to some of the weaker Heisei kaiju, such as Mecha King Ghidorah, Batcha, and Mothra and Bio, with Batcha and Mothra scaling above Amaterasu and Tetsuo, who scale to Orochi, who not only scales to characters containing hyperspaces, makes a crack in space and time, but has characters who would transcend dimensionality outright, with Mecha King Ghidorah even being stated to transcend time and space as a whole, adding consistency to at least fourth dimensional, maybe even fifth dimensional with the aforementioned transcending space and time statement, but also the fact that Ghidorah uses supergravity on already a 4D universe, and being directly compared to Space Godzilla's supergravity, which with the supergravity being higher dimensional gravity means it would be a fifth dimensional structure, arguably, aka low complex multiversal. However, it is a highball, so you can argue the fact that he's either Uni Plus or fourth dimensional, or fifth dimensional and low complex multiversal. For speed, there's several calcs showing that Showa Godzilla is FTL or MFTL, and characters he scales to, such as Ghidorah or Gigan via traveling space, are in the same tier of speed. So I'm just going to put those calcs on screen and let you guys read that out real quick. If you think the highball is fine, then Showa will automatically be immeasurable due to that aforementioned fifth dimensional scaling, as he would be above linear time, which is the requirement for immeasurable. Not for hacks, not only does Showa Godzilla weaponize and can use his radiation in combat, not only with his atomic breath but his other techniques, but can also grow and adapt to situations and his opponents at a rapid rate, having a pretty good growth factor even against Mechagodzilla. He grew to a point where even though Mechagodzilla was 5 times stronger, he went from needing help to beat Mechagodzilla to quite literally beating Mechagodzilla in a 2v1, all things considered. So even over growth periods of time, Godzilla can grow far over 5 times stronger in a given scenario, which is definitely a lot of trouble for his opponents. Now, let's get into Miku. Just like Godzilla, Miku would at least range from those star to multi-solar tiers of power. This is due to in Project Mirai Deluxe, where not only does she move the sun at FTL speeds, making her at least star, but also moves a starry sky, a multi-solar feat. This is consistent with a similar feat she performs by literally jumping on planets and moving them, with her size getting into that large star range, as well as the movement of the planets that she's causing. And you can just use her size to add consistency even to multi-solar Miku for the higher end calculations. But you can get her higher. As we know in Project Diva, she powers the virtual world and scales to it, a infinite realm with infinite possibilities, already making it at least a high universal structure, but due to the fact that this contains space and time, meaning Miku scales to an infinite 4D realm. This isn't even inconsistent, as in her crossover she scales to the Battle Cats, who have statements of flat out transcending space and time, transcending dimensions and hyperstasis, as well as creating everything. So she could also find herself between those Uni Plus to maybe low complex multiversal tiers of power. Or if you want to get her higher, you can argue she scales to things like Shin Megami Tensei, or, as most of you know it,
you never see it coming,
and that cosmology. And I won't sit down and explain the cosmology, but if you know, you know. That would make this video ridiculously long. You can also argue that she might even have scaling to Sonic in the newest game, which that game also is going to have things like Minecraft and Joker, so take that as you will. That just might add consistency for this whole Shin Megami Tensei thing. But I'll leave a link for Shin Megami Tensei cosmology in the description if you want to see that. And she even scales to Madoka Magica from that one anime, who's in that multi-plus tiers of power. Some people think she's outer, but that's more of a topic for another video, and she really only shows multi-plus feats. Her multi-plus feats coming from the fact that she completely reformed her multiverse, which is stated to be made of infinite universes. Which, yeah, that is a multi-plus feat, pretty blatantly. So nothing you can really do to argue that. It would be pretty consistent that Miku at the very least would range from those 4 to infinite 4th dimensional tiers of power to even 5th dimensional. For speed, once again, I'm just going to throw a lot of MFTL speed stuff. And if you think she's 5D, then automatically she's immeasurable, though some statements in her songs might even imply that she's omnipresent. But take that as you will. You could also see it as just purely hyperbolic or not literal. But it is still something to consider that it is possible that she's omnipresent, so take it as you will. For hacks, oh my goodness. Everything from granting wishes to resurrection to conceptual and abstract existence, regeneration, tune force, reality warping, BFR, extrasensory perception, non-physical reaction, among many other things. In conclusion, not going by Miku's Shin Megami Tensei scaling, in which, to be fair, you could probably maybe argue the higher ends for Showa Godzilla off of scaling to Marvel cosmology if you want to get into that route of scaling, since Showa Godzilla is Marvel Godzilla and arguably might be even the current one as well for at least some of these variants. Both of these guys would range from the multi-solo to universal plus tiers of power consistently, with their highest ends being 5th dimensional or lower complex multiversal, and both being MFTL+. However, Miku does have more consistent arguments for higher into this 4th dimensional tiers of power or 5th dimensional, while Godzilla only has some, and most of his other stuff is just kind of uni or high universal or uni plus. Miku is the only one of the two that has the more consistent statements, scaling, etc. to these higher into 4th dimensional or 5th dimensional beings and things. And both are just MFTL+. And while omnipresence isn't really nearly a speed, more so a state of being, it should technically mean Miku is faster than Godzilla. When it comes to hacks, while Godzilla is the more skilled fighter, shockingly, I know that sounds incredibly stupid, but for some reason, Showa Godzilla just has insane skill scaling, and it does have the power growth, which Miku doesn't necessarily have a specific counter to. Godzilla could potentially grow stronger than Miku over the course of a longer fight, and maybe use his radiation against her as well, but she is a robot, so Nothing Godzilla really has really counters if Miku just wishes Godzilla away, or attacks him conceptually, or BFRs him, or could Godzilla even hit him? I mean, Miku is technically a abstract conceptual being that is non-physical in a sense, so maybe Godzilla can't even really hit him for the matter. And even if she could, Miku can resurrect herself and regenerate from any damage given to her. While Godzilla probably has regeneration, it's nowhere near on Miku's level. I mean, we've seen before that he's gotten large cuts and such before, and he doesn't really instantly regenerate for that matter. So in conclusion, while Godzilla is more skilled, once again shockingly, and more experienced, and potentially could outgrow Miku given enough time, he's never fought someone like Miku, who not only has the argument of being faster off of omnipresence, or at least in a better state of being, has arguments for being stronger and is more consistently into these higher tiers of power, but also objectively has hacks for days that Godzilla really can't do anything against, unfortunately. I mean, once again, it's not like Godzilla really has a counter to just simply being wished away or attacking someone conceptually. I mean, maybe he does, but at least, once again, nothing quantifiably on the level of what Miku would have. For people who worry about size as a factor, as I discussed before, Miku can make herself as large as planets and galaxies, so if anything, if you want to go by the size game, Miku would still win that debate very easily. So in conclusion, I would say Miku wins this without much difficulty. The only way I could see Godzilla pulling out a win is if for some reason the fight is stalled to the point where Godzilla gets so much stronger than Miku, her hacks don't matter. But I see this as being very unlikely if Godzilla's power growth could even cover the distance between these two characters at all, which it might not even be able to, depending on what scaling for Miku you believe. So, thank you for watching this video. Like, subscribe, and share it around with your friends, and peace.